So today's agenda is DVM. We are going to talk about the DVM today, and this is one of the very important topics in complete Oracle SOA suite. See, when we talk about the Oracle SOA suite implementation, there are few topics which are like generic one, or which would be there in all the implementations, such as error handling, or we can say fault handling, the DVM concept, MDS concept, which we'll be seeing in coming sessions. So these are the 3 or 4 topics which are like generic. Like for example, if I talk about, let's say, a while activity, okay, that may or may not be there depending on the use case, but this DVM, MDS, fault handling, these would be there as a part of each and every process you implement. Okay, so these topics are very important to be understood, and DVM is one of the topics which is asked like very frequently in the interviews, and having the proper understanding of the DVM is very important, and like what are the different use cases where we can leverage the DVM to give more agility to our solution basically. So let's get started. Okay, it might take 2 to 3 hours to complete DVM, so for next couple of sessions we might continue with DVM with different use cases. So I'll start with a first simpler use case, and tomorrow we'll take a little complex on that. So first of all, DVM stands for domain value map. Okay, so what does it mean? It is a process of mapping the values from one domain to another. Okay, here when I say it is a process of mapping the values from one domain to another, it means that there might be multiple systems which we work with in real-time industry. Okay, and each system might have different notations for representing the same thing. Okay, for example, I am trying to integrate my Oracle app system with the SAP system. So they might be having the different notations of representing the same thing. So what happens is we need to make sure whenever, let's say, system A, there is a system A which is trying to talk with system B, and these both the systems have different notations of representing the same thing, then whenever a request comes from A towards the B, then in between we should have some mechanism which does a mapping in a convention that can be understood by the target system, so that system really understands what source system is really trying to say. For example, there is a system A where the naming convention for a city might be something like, HYD, which ultimately stands for Hyderabad. But in system A, I might be using some short code for the city, whereas in my system B, I understand HYD as Hyderabad. I do not understand what is HYD. So the request, when it flows out from the system A, there might be HYD, but before it reaches to system B, it should be transformed or mapped to Hyderabad. Okay, such kind of mappings are required so that the other system or the target system can also understand the convention. Okay, both are ultimately targeting the same meaning, but the way these are represented are different. So it's like, we have different languages, and in different languages there are different ways to greet the people. Okay, some people say namaste, some people say hi. So there are different ways to greet people. So whenever there has to be a integration among these different people, so we have to ensure that we greet the target system in a format which he understands. Okay, for example, if I say namaste, okay, and Chinese person might not understand it, so I have to make sure that I either hire some person who basically transforms my way of greeting into a way which a Chinese person understands. Similarly, here we have got a layer between these two systems, that is SOA layer, and within the SOA layer we have got a concept called as domain value map, which helps in doing such kind of mappings. The question comes, is it the only way of doing such mappings? Answer is no. We can easily do the mapping of this sort with the help of assign activities and all we were seeing over here. For example, we can have a switch activity within which we can have a case where we can write cases if city code, let's say this is city code, is HYD, then I might do mapping, then I use assign activity so that target node is mapped to Hyderabad. Okay, these kind of things can be done without DVM also. But what is the beauty of the DVM is that DVM can be changed at the fly. Whatever mappings you design in the DVM, these can be changed at the fly. These are more flexible. At runtime, you can do the changes without any server restart, without any code recompilation, without any code redeployment. Whatever mappings you design in DVM, those can be changed at the runtime. That's why it gives a lot of agility to your solution. So anything, any mapping, for example, which was earlier saying that HYD was mapped to Hyderabad. Now in future, there comes a change where I have to change HY to Hyderabadi. These kind of changes can be done in just 2 to 3 minutes. But if we hard code the similar things over here in our code itself using the switch and all, this might take a lot of time. We have to follow the complete SDLC to basically make a very small code change. So if you feel any play at any place within the code, you have to do certain mapping which is more prone to change. Okay, such kind of mappings can always be designed with the help of DVM, and most of the scenario it is used when we are representing two different notations for two different systems, but internally both the notations refer to the same thing. Okay, that is point number one, but that is not the only use of the DVM. So if those people who come from the Java background might be knowing, there is a concept of properties file. There is a concept of properties file in Java where what we do is, let's say I have to connect to some DB. So whenever I have to connect to some DB, I would need the host name, I would need the service name, I would need the user ID, password. So instead of hard coding all that stuff, we define the key value pair in the properties file. Okay, so the basic agenda or the basic idea is that if we hard code that stuff in the code, we need to recompile everything and all. So instead of doing that, what we do is, within the Java code or the Java function or method which we define, we read those values from a file, and that is called as our properties file, in order to design our solution more flexible, so that whenever the same code moves from one environment to another, the change we have to do is only the properties file. Right, we need not to make a change in the code because it is the only properties file which where we have defined the environment specific things, so that our Java code can pull those values which are environment specific from the properties file. So the basic idea is our properties file might change from environment to another environment, but my code absolutely remains same. Similarly, whatever you feel, uh, I'm not talking only about the environment specific things. So I mean to say, if you feel there is some condition which you want to check, okay, and you do not want to hard code it. For example, there is something like, I say, if day is equal to Monday, if day is equal to Monday, my discount is, let's say, 50%. This is what I want ultimately, but I don't want, I'm not sure that every time it will be on the day Monday only, or it might change. Let's say I have decided a scenario where I'm going to offer 50% discount on any one of the days in a week, but I'm not sure which day will that be for a particular week. It might be Monday, it might be Tuesday, sometimes it might be Saturday. So it can vary in different weeks. So I cannot hard code such kind of solutions. Okay, I need a more agile way of doing it. So what we do is, such kind of things in the people can be defined with the help of DVM, where what we will do is, we will maintain these values in the DVM, and here we will have the reference to the values defined in the DVM. Okay, we'll show you this how to do that, but I'm trying to explain you the concept. So I will not hard code the value. Instead of doing that, I will try to refer that value from the DVM. Why I'm doing so? Because as I mentioned earlier, DVM's beauty is that its value can be changed at the fly. Its value can be changed at the runtime. So we can go there into the SOA composer. There is something called a SOA composer which allows you to manipulate the values stored in the DVM, and you can easily change those values. Are you people following me? Anyone who is not understanding? Yes. So it basically gives you a privilege to design your solution more agile and more flexible, which has the tendency to incorporate the changes which comes very frequently, and you basically make your solution more loosely coupled, more less dependent on the hard coded values, and so because we really need such kind of things, such kind of facilities in every programming language we work with. So this in within the people or within this Oracle SOA suite, this has been possible with the help of concept of DVM. So DVM is used at multiple places. I'll show you two right now, and once we cover the MDS, I'll show you one more. So total, I'll show you three use cases on the DVM, which would be more than enough when you work in the industry. You will not come across anything beyond that. We use SOA per service where number of days is stored in DVM. Yes. Right. So, basically that's what we make things more configurable. Okay. So whenever we have to make things more configurable, then we have to go for this DVM. Let's say in my project we have a scenario like I work on a project where my client provides port in and port out services for the different telecommunication companies in US. So like you might have heard about AT&T, you might have heard about Google, you might have heard about Mediacom. These are the different telecommunication companies which who are there in the US. So like in India, like let's say we have Airtel and we want to switch on to some other service provider, let's say Vodafone. Okay, so this might take 2 or 3 days, but in US this all process happens in some minutes. Okay, in 5 to 6 minutes you can switch from one service provider to another service provider. So different service providers have different validations, have different rules. So, but there are, let's say, 100 service providers. Out of the 100 service providers, there might be possibility that 40 to 50 are following the same flow of execution. Like they follow the same validations, they follow the same protocols to basically make it possible for any customer to move from one service provider to another. So what I do is I design some code and I make that configurable. So today one more customer gets added, and he says that I would follow the protocol which is being followed by, let's say, Mediacom. So what I would do is I would just add one entry for this customer also, so that in future whenever any new request comes in for port in of the number, I need not to design a new code. Just I have made my code configurable so that I reuse the code more and more, and it gives an add-on to the customer also, because if you make something configurable, okay, it reduces the effort of the programmer, and it gives more business to the client also, because he can just add one name and his services are ready. So whenever you talk about making things configurable at the people level, definitely we'll go for this DVM. As Vipul mentioned that they are using some DVM where they have decided the number of days for which they have to do purging from the DVM. Okay, because like let's say today I have the business has decided that we will do purging of all the instances which are a week older, but again those things might change. So just it is a DVM change, and DVM change can be done in just 2 minutes. Okay, we can directly do at the database level, or else we ideally don't do that. Okay, these all things will be taken care by the admin people. There would be a SOA admin who will be doing this, but most of the times if you are working as a developer, there would be a SOA composer leveraging which you can do these changes. Any doubts so far? Are you understanding a high level, basically understanding what is the need of the DVM or what exactly is DVM? You can easily compare it with a properties file, okay, concept we have in Java. Okay, but again I'm not saying that has been brought into the picture just to develop an analogy and have a better understanding. Is it something like we used to create data source and at runtime we change the DB connection settings from data source? See, data source is something different altogether. Data source would be something like which represents the complete your DB details by one single name. That is your DSN or data source name or data source. This is different from DVM. DVM and data source, what you're talking is different. Okay, so what we will do is we'll build a simple scenario. First of all, we'll see how do we define DVM. uh, See, DVM is something, which is whatever values you have to do at the time of mapping. Okay, those are fixed, those are given at the design time. But cross reference is something like DVM only, but the values with which we are doing mapping can be decided at the runtime. We'll talk about the cross referencing as well. Okay, the only difference is in DVM I will design the, like, let's say my source column key value pair, and that key value pair would remain as is. But in the cross referencing, what happens is, like, I can decide the mapping for the key at the runtime. So mapping would be decided at the runtime, so it will be like a dynamic mapping, but here it's like a static mapping. So which particular column is mapped to which particular target, or which particular source is mapped to which particular target, is already designed and it is there with you. But in cross referencing, it's a dynamic mapping. When I say dynamic, it means this particular source would be mapped to which particular target can be decided at the runtime. Okay, so what we will do is we'll start with the simple solution. So we'll first of all learn how to create a DVM. So please understand, the extension of DVM file will be .dvm. .dvm is the extension of DVM file, and it is a XML based file. It is a basically XML based file. .dvm is the extension of DVM file. And the next thing I wanted to tell you is there is a concept of qualifier as well in the DVM. We'll talk about this as well. I'm not talking right now, but those people who are already working on Oracle SOA, or who might have done a little bit of R&D, might have come across something like qualifier, because this is one of the interview questions which is asked frequently, that what is qualifier in DVM. And the next thing is, how can we modify the values of the DVM using SOA composer. We can change the values of DVM at runtime. When I say I can change the values, it means I can add new mappings, I can delete the existing one, or even I can modify the existing one. So this basically allows you to perform an insert operation, update operation, as well as delete operation. And this DVM, whatever we design, is internally basically gets stored in the database under the MDS schema. Okay, like when you run the this RCUs, you create certain schemas like SOA infra, MDS, or SGPM and all. So this DVM internally gets stored in your MDS. Okay, so this is the high level understanding. So what I will do is I'll design a use case where you give city code as an input, you will give certain city code as an input, and you get certain city value as an output. Okay, so you will design a synchronous process which takes city code as an input and you get city value as an output, but that city value will be picked up, or will be looked up from your DVM. So let's say I give HYD as an input, so as an output I should get Hyderabad. I will not hard code anywhere that whenever input is HYD I have to return Hyderabad as an output. I'm not going to do any such kind of hard coding. What I will do is I will design a DVM where HYD might be mapped to Hyderabad. So whenever input comes from the user at the runtime, I will perform a lookup operation on the DVM, and I will try to fetch the target value corresponding to HYD, and whatever value is designed over there, or whatever value is defined over there, I would look up that value and I will map to my target column. So based on the input comes from the user, I will perform a lookup operation on the DVM, and I would find the corresponding target mapping, and that particular mapping would be picked up from there and would be mapped to my intended node. For example, let's say user enters NDLS, so that might have a mapping corresponding to New Delhi. So I would pick up New Delhi from there, and I can map it uh, from the value. I can map the value which is picked up from this particular DVM to my target node. That's what I'm supposed to do. So you have to understand one thing, that your source column or the value on the basis of which you have to perform the lookup operation would be passed at the runtime by the end user or by the end system. So let's say HYD is the my runtime value, and on the basis of which I will perform the lookup operation, and then I would find a corresponding value which is Hyderabad, and I would map it to my intended node. Now I was talking about the concept of qualifier. When the concept of qualifier comes into the picture is, let's say I have HYD. Okay, HYD is mapped to Hyderabad also. HYD is mapped to Hyderabadi also. So now there are two mappings for HYD. So now when let's say control comes to your a place where you're supposed to perform the lookup operation on the DVM, and now when you perform the lookup operation, you are expecting only a single value, which ultimately is not happening over here in this scenario, because you do not have a concrete specific value as per your mapping. So in that case, what happens is, if definitely you need some specific value, the role of qualifier comes in. So let's say I have designed one more column qualifier, and I say qualifier value is, let's say, full form, and here it is some, let's say, language, just an assumption. So at the runtime, user might send two inputs, HYD, and he says, let's say, full form. Then this qualifier would help me in reaching to a definite value. When I look up HYD, I definitely find two values, but when I take help of this qualifier as well, I reach to a specific definite value, that is Hyderabad. But let's say when the user sends HYD and he sends language, so I understand that he is talking about this Hyderabadi. So the point I'm trying to say is, qualifier comes into the picture when we are unable to reach to a specific value, or when we have multiple values for a particular key in the DVM. Then this qualifier helps you to basically reach to a one definite value that lets you to basically find out one single target column or a single mapping corresponding to the source column. Are you people following me? Any doubts from anyone till here? So we'll take one by one. In the first example, we will not introduce qualifier. First, let's keep it simple and let's try to understand how to play with the values at the runtime. So we are expecting one use case where we get some input, like let's say city code, and we leverage the concept of DVM to map its value to a corresponding notation in which might be there in some other system. Let's say HYD is represented as Hyderabad. So in order to do this, what we will do is we'll go here onto the JDeveloper and we will start with the development. So what I do is I will start with a new SOA project. I go to file, I go to new, and I start with a new SOA project. Let's say I name it as a DVM and I click on finish. So I'm developing a new SOA project in order to incorporate the concept of DVM in my one of the use cases. Okay, so here we go. This is my DVM project. Now guys, we have to understand one thing. In order to leverage the DVM, you should have DVM defined. Okay, we haven't defined DVM anywhere so far. So before I get into the development, let me define the DVM. And how do we do that? We go to file, we go to new, and here in the search box just type domain. When you do that, on the right hand side you can see something called as DVM, domain value map, which says a domain value map is a mapping of domain values amongst different domain systems, and to enable to this, just we have to click on OK. So we will try to design a DVM which will help in mapping the values, okay, among different domain systems. I just click on OK. So I told you, like, extension of DVM file will be .dvm. So I'm naming it this as city mapping.dvm. This is the location where it is getting stored. Okay, so within the 10 AM SOA batch, I have got an application. Within application, it is getting stored as of now. If you want to, so I mean, within the application, we have got a project DVM within which it is going to store. So right now, the current location where this DVM file is going to get created is the application 10 AM SOA batch, within the application I have got a project DVM where it's going to get created. Now here we have to give certain initial entries. If you want to give it over here, well and good. If you don't want to give, just click on OK. So this is the design view where you can create the DVM. So this is my domain 1. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to edit it. I just click on edit button. Okay, so I want to change its name. Let's say I want to keep it city code. You can always change the values of the domain if you want. So I didn't change over there. Right now what I did is I selected the domain and I clicked on this edit button, which looks like a pencil symbol. I click over here and I name city value. So it's up to you whatever naming convention you want to use. So this city code and city value for me is like a key value there. So at this point of time, I have not defined which particular column is going to act as a key and which particular column is going to act as a value corresponding to that. I repeat, at this point of time, I haven't defined that which particular column is going to act as a key and which particular column is going to act as a value corresponding to it. So I might use city code as a key and I might use city value as also a key. So I haven't done that. I have not specified anything related to that as of now. So now I have to define the value. So these are like, this is like a table. So city code and city value are the name of the columns, and now we have to create the records. It's something like that. So I say HYD. Whenever you enter any value manually, please make a habit that you definitely hit an enter key, or else your change might not get reflected in the source code. I hit enter key and I move myself to the next column, city value. So I'm saying it is mapped to Hyderabad. Okay, and I would like to enter one more entry, so I click on this plus symbol and I select add domain values. So let's say my new domain value is NDLS and this would be mapped to New Delhi. So this is what I have done. As of now I have added two entries. I would take you to the source code. Okay, it's very important to understand the source code. So right now if you see, do you see those values have got reflected over here anywhere? HYD, Hyderabad, those haven't got reflected. This usually happens. This is a common mistake we do. Okay, sometimes even though we hit the enter button, the change doesn't get reflected over here. So you can directly change the code as well. So let's say HYD is mapped to Hyderabad and NDLS is mapped to New Delhi. Okay, so if you try to understand over here, the root element of the DVM file is a DVM itself, and it is a XML based file which has got columns and the rows, and within rows we have got a cell. So each row right now has two cells. We can have multiple cells as well. I'll show you more complex scenarios as well. I save all the changes and I switch back to the design view. So now you see the changes are reflecting over here in the design view as well as in the source code view. It's most important that you have got the changes in the source view. Okay, if you see them in the design view, but if those are not reflecting in the code view or the source view, then you might face some runtime issues. So please ensure that the same changes which you have done in the design view are getting reflected over here. Once we feel that things are fine, so it means we are as of now done with the creation of the DVM, and now we can try to make our solution to basically perform a lookup operation on this DVM based on the key, and we would try to fetch the value corresponding to that key at the runtime. But at this point of time I have not specified which particular column is going to act as a key and which particular column is going to act as a value corresponding to that key. So those things haven't been defined over here. I go back to the composer.xml. So before I move forward, let me ask you guys if you have any doubts over here. So I would have a separate example for qualifier. I cannot show in this. The reason being, people who do not, like, there are people in this particular group who are very new to Oracle SOA. So I just don't want to confuse them. Definitely we have a next example which would incorporate qualifier as well. So now what we do is we start with a synchronous Beeple process. and we'll name it as, let's say, DVM process. Everything remains as is. I just click on OK. Okay, I try to track my WSDL file corresponding to the service which gets automatically created, and I want to change the name of the operation. So let's say I have a default name process. I name it as DVM lookup. That's what I'm going to do in this example. And by default the format of the request is a single string as an input and a single string as an output. So does that match my use case, or do I need to make any modifications there in the XSD file in order to make sure that it matches our requirement? So Rochak says it matches, which is absolutely correct. I don't need anything out of the box, so I would go with the default settings. So just I would try to show you once the format of the request and the response. I'm going to get one string as an input. I'm going to return one string as an output. Just to make more things more understandable or more readable, I will make it city code, and my return is city value. Okay, these changes in the name doesn't do much, but basically it makes your solution more understandable by other ecosystems with which your service is going to interact. So city code and city value are the two fields names which I have changed. If I might have not done the changes in the name, then also there was no impact as such. I restore myself to the design view. I'll go back to the composite. So I've got a export service, I've got a beeple. Before I get into the development in the beeple, I'll go to the source view and I will just make a change in the name of the operation. So we have got a process as a name, DVM lookup, and here it will be DVM lookup. So the changes are done. I save all the stuff. I go back to the design view. Now here guys, in order to basically fetch the values from the DVM, we have got a function called as lookup function, okay, which allows you to fetch the values from the DVM. Now so far, whenever we had to design an expression, okay, whenever we have to do the mapping of the values from one variable to another, which particular activity was being used so far in all examples we have covered? Whenever we had to do the mapping the values of one variable to another, or else we had to basically assign an expression to a target node, or basically if you have to do certain hard coding, we always made use of assign activity. Now for this use case as well, you can definitely go with the assign activity, but at this point of time I want to introduce a new activity which ideally does more or less a similar task which assign activity does, but apart from that it has got certain additional advantages. Okay, it basically works on the XSLT, which is your XML style sheet language. So it has got certain XSLT constructs which basically helps you to do the effective mapping. Okay, we'll come across small use cases when we have to leverage that activity, but right now I am introducing that new activity because there is a reason behind that. So apart from assign activity, we can definitely have one more activity, that is transform activity, which is useful for doing the mapping more effectively than assign activity, because your transform activity has XSLT constructs such as for each, if, XSL choose when, which means let's say I have to do certain mapping, and while doing the mapping I have to check certain conditions. Okay, or while doing the mapping I might have to design some my own logic. I have to do certain validations, I have to do certain checks, I have to do certain manipulations, which might not be possible in assign activity, but those are very much possible in your XSLT. So if you feel there are certain transformations which are very difficult to achieve, okay, where you need some custom codes to be designed, so in all the such scenarios we prefer to use transform activity. So instead of assign activity, in this example I am leveraging transform activity. For this particular example, actually transform activity was not a mandate. There is a reason why I am doing that. So I just double click on this transform activity. On the top you have to select source, and on the bottom you have to select the target. I say my source is input variable and my target is output variable, and this is the location where your mapper file gets generated, which is also called as XML style sheet. Okay, so transformation1.xsl will be the name of the file. I click on this plus symbol since I'm generating the mapper file for the first time. and for the subsequent times you have to just click on this edit symbol whenever you want to edit the file. Since it is my first attempt, I generate the mapper file. On the left hand side you can see the source, on the right hand side you can do the target. Here the mappings can be done very effectively, and whenever we have huge mappings to be done among the multiple nodes, we prefer using the transform activity, because here you can understand the things more clearly as compared to your assign activity. So now when I just minimize the screen, on the right hand side you can see certain functions which were available in the assign activity as well. But one thing which was missing from the assign activity was this XSLT constructs, which are available only in the transform activity, and this XSLT constructs would be really very helpful when you have to do certain, when you have to make certain decisions at the time of doing the mapping itself. Okay, so let's say there is a scenario where you hit some database, you run some select query in the database, and you fetch, let's say, 1,000 records on the basis of that query, and you have to do the mapping of those 1,000 records to the target node. So such kind of things are not possible to achieve in the assign activity when you have to do the mapping of multiple nodes. Okay, that is not possible in the assign activity, but that is very much possible in the transform activity because of this XSLT constructs. As of now we are not talking about those constructs, so apart from these general functions there are certain advanced functions also. Even these advanced functions are there in the assign activity also. So I'll go to DVM functions, and here I have a lookup value functions which would fetch ultimately only one value as an output. Lookup value one to many will fetch multiple values. Okay, so it depends what kind of use case you are designing. So for one key, if you have a use case where you want to have fetch all the multiple values, then you can definitely go for this function as well. So right now my use case is about lookup value, so I'll drag this function on this bottom lane. All the functions are basically dragged in this bottom lane. You might see some warning symbol because you have not configured this function. I just double click on this. On the bottom side you can see the description of the function, which you could see in the assign activity also. But the beauty of using the functions in this transform activity is, here you, like, whenever you have to leverage any predefined function, basically you need to call the function, and in order to call the function you need to have the proper syntax. But since we are new to this function, we are using this for the first time, there are probabilities that we might make certain mistake. In order to avoid that mistake, what I am doing is I'm using this version or this way of calling the function, which is like a more like configurable one, so that my chances of making the mistake gets reduced. That was the only reason why I have switched to transform activity then assign activity, because in assign activity I didn't have these options like you see search option and all. There I had to write the code myself, and we should try avoiding writing the code wherever it is possible, because chances of making the mistakes reduces. So I use this format. I will once I understand that what is the exact syntax of calling the function, then definitely I can use the assign activity also. So I click on the search symbol, I click on browse, and this is my first parameter which says about the DVM location. So I select my DVM which I have to leverage while performing the lookup operation. So this is my DVM location. This is my first parameter to a function. And what is the name of the function? The name of the function is this one, DVM colon lookup, and this is the first parameter, that is DVM location, and that has to be given in as a string. So that's why you see the first parameter is under double quotes. Now next thing is source column name. Now this is the point where I am going to specify which particular column is going to act as a key. When I designed my DVM, I have not mentioned anywhere that which particular column is going to act as a key and which particular column is going to act as a pair. There was nothing mentioned of that sort. Now at this point of time I am saying my source column name is city code or city value, whichever I want. I want to keep it as city code. Now from where the value of the city code would come? The value of the city code would come at the fly. So here what you can do is you can just hold control and space bar. So intelligence would take you to the element. You need not to write the expression yourself. You see their process is the complex element. Select this, within which you have a city code as the element which will have the value, okay, for the city code. So source value will be present in this particular element which would be populated at the runtime, and my target column name is city value, and its value will be picked up from the DVM. So now we have to define the default value. Let's say user gives certain input corresponding to which there is no value found in the DVM. So then in that case, what is required to be returned? Your default value would be returned to the client. So let's say I type here city code not found. Okay, this would be the value that gets returned to the end user in case he gives certain input for which there is no entry in the DVM. So I just click on OK. So you see this is the input which is going into this particular function, which is lookup value function, and whatever comes as an output for this particular function, that requires to be mapped, and that requires to be mapped to your target node. So this is what is happening. You get some input, you are calling certain function, and whatever comes as an output, you are mapping it to the target field. This is the design view. If you switch to the source view, scroll down, so this is a XML based file, and the root element for this particular XSL file is style sheet, where you see your target element is process response, within which you have city value. So the value of the node city value will be fetched from this expression. So this code I didn't want to write myself, okay, because there were certain chances of making the mistake. That's why I used this configurable view of calling the function. Now once I understand the parameters and their order, I can definitely go to the assigned activity, and there I can just type this complete code myself. So first parameter is the DVM name, second parameter is your source column name, third parameter is your source column value, fourth parameter is your target column name, and the fifth one is the default value. These are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4 or 5. Okay, these are the 5 parameters which we are passing to this lookup value function to basically complete my use case. Any doubts so far? Okay, so what we will do is we'll close all the stuff which reflects on my screen as of now, and we would deploy our process. Right click and deploy. At the time of deployment itself, anyhow it's going to get compiled. Deploy to application server, override anything existing with the same revision ID, click on next, and here we have got a connection with our application server already defined. I just select that connection and I just click on next. It starts looking up for the SOA servers, and here I'll select the partition which is 10 AM batch, click on next and finish. We go to the logs tab, we see the deployment has just got started, the build is going on. Meanwhile what I'll do is I'll try to log in into the EM console, because I would need to test my service. So I would just refresh this console from here, and I'll log in using the credentials, WebLogic and my password, and I just log in into the console. Meanwhile, let's observe the status of the deployment in parallel back to JDeveloper. So if you see, the deployment is finished for this particular composite, everything has been successful, there was no error and warning, the deployment is done. So let's switch to this console. Meanwhile, I'm opening one more console, so that is nothing but my host name and the port number, and after that I'm typing SOA/composer. Okay, this is one enterprise application which allows you to modify the values at the runtime for the DVM. So I would need this later on, so I'm launching at the same time. It takes certain time to come up. Meanwhile, let's switch to the EM console. Okay, it is also taking certain time. What I'll do is I'll open one more console, that is my admin console. I launch the admin console as well, or my WebLogic console, because I need to show you few things from there as well. So it is taking certain time. Let's hold on for few minutes. Once these are in, then we will show you the testing of the service. Then we will see how to edit the DVM at the runtime, how to add the new entries in the runtime, and again we will come back to our EM console, and once we do those changes at the runtime, then again we will try to test our service, so that we can prove the statement that this particular DVM allows you to make the changes at the runtime. Okay. Meanwhile, if we have any doubts so far for the things which we have covered, we can take those. Okay, once this comes up, we can show you the testing part also. Okay, so the deployment is done as per the logs. Any doubts, guys, so far? I can see, are you getting my messages? I don't see anything before that. Just hold on, let me check. I can only see, are you getting my messages? Can you please type in once again if you've mentioned, if you've typed in anything apart from that? Okay, so I am on to the look table, also something like DVM. I am really not aware about the look table function, if there is any function look table which allows lookup table. Is it any function we have in the this assign activity? I would need to check on that. I've never used this function. See, this you cannot say it is like DVM. Lookup table might be a function which allows you to look up the values from a particular table which is defined in the database. So DVM is also like, ultimately like a table in the database which is defined by you, and you can basically change its values at the runtime, and instead of hard coding the values in your code, you are putting that into the table, so that depending on your requirements you can update the values into the table, and whenever those values are looked up from that particular table, you would get the changed values. So it's as good as that. I mean, so it's something like, just removing the dependency and making all those dependent things to be added in a particular table. So I think it would be more or less same, but yeah, it might be certain function which helps you to manipulate the values from the DVM. Let me check on that once and I'll get back to you on this maybe tomorrow. Okay, so what we do is, here we have got multiple partitions. We have got 10 a.m. batch. We'll go to DVM 1.0. I click on the test button to test my service. So I've got let's just Sumit. Okay, there is no such city code. So I test my web service. I get city code not found. Okay, the reason being the default value we had set is city code not found. And one more thing you have to understand is, whatever we have typed in the DVM, everything is case sensitive. So you have to ensure that whatever you type in is matching the same case as the one which you have defined in the DVM. So let's say in the city code I type HYD and I test the web service. I get Hyderabad. So what is happening is, we are performing a lookup operation on the basis of that key into that DVM, and we are getting the corresponding value which is Hyderabad, which is being returned as an output. Now what I have to show you is, here is my admin console or WebLogic console. I log in into this WebLogic welcome one. It's my password. So once I log in into this, I have to understand, I have to check whether my SOA composer is up or not. So definitely my SOA composer is up, because I can see SOA composer over here. But for some people who are working, like who have set up the new environment in your respective machines, when you launch this URL, you might see that SOA composer doesn't come up. So there is nothing to panic. You go here under deployments. Within your domain, you might see something called as deployments. Go over there, and here you might find something like EM, or not EM, sorry, composer. Let's search. Okay, here you see composer. You must find it in an active state. Okay, if you find it in an installed state and it is not in active state, just click on the composer. Okay, just click on the composer here. The The configuration for a component is still being loaded for your last request. Please wait a moment and retry. Okay, it's taking some time basically. So ultimately, basically, you have to ensure that this is in active state to launch your composer. So if your composer is not coming up, just go to the deployments and check the state of this composer. Sometimes what happens is the target for this composer might not be defined. So you can just go ahead and try to define the target of your composer, which would be an admin server. And once you have this composer in an active state, then you can launch this composer. Okay, and you can just log in into this using the same credentials. Okay, and here on the top left you can see something called open, where you have to select open DVM, where you can see different DVMs which are defined for your batches and all. So right now I have this one. I'm interested in this one, okay, because this is my project and this is my partition. I just click on open. So this is what I defined, when I was working in my design view or when I was working in my JDeveloper. Now I'm interested in editing it, so click on edit button on the top. So here you get a privilege. So let's say I want to remove this entry. I want to edit this entry. Select this and click on the edit button. And here you can change the value to Hyderabadi. And I will add a new entry. So let's say MUM, which is mapped to Mumbai. So what I have done is I have done all the three operations which I talked about. I have performed delete operation. I have performed an update operation. And at the same time I have performed an insert operation. After doing all this, just save all your changes. If you want to add certain comments, you can do that and click on commit button. Yeah, I have added a new entry, a new city code MUM, so that at the run, which was not existing earlier. So I just want to show that when I do the changes at the runtime, it doesn't matter. See, it doesn't matter you give in caps or less, but just you have to ensure that when you are definitely testing the service, M has to be caps. Definitely, I do remember that. Okay, if I don't mention M in caps while testing my service, definitely I'll get a message city code not found, which is my default message, which is absolutely correct. Is it possible to edit exited code? What do you mean by exited code? I didn't understand, Veda. What do you mean by exited code? Yeah, you can do that. You can change anything. For example, here I again click on edit button. I select this edit. So it gives you privilege to enter both the fields. Okay, it's not only HYD. I can change it to HYD caps also. I just click on OK. Okay, I directly commit all the changes. Yes, I've done that. I switch back to my test console. So I would again refresh my DVM 1.0. Right now I had two instances which I checked. I again click on the test button. So now I check with HYD. So this won't work anymore because you do not have anything with such casing. I click on the test web service button. So it says city code not found because you have changed the case to caps. So I go to the request once again and now I change it to capital HYD and I test the web service. So now you are getting Hyderabadi, which is working fine. Okay, now I check once again NDLS, the entry which was existing here, but now it's not existing anymore. I click on the test web service button. It says city code not found, which means the entry has been deleted from the DVM at the runtime. And again, I would check for an entry which has been newly added. That is my MUM. M was in caps. I test the web service, so I get Mumbai as an output. Okay, so this means I am able to make the changes at the runtime in the DVM, and those changes are getting reflected once I commit my changes in the SOA composer. So like many people read the blogs and all, but they do not mention about SOA composer, which is an important aspect of this DVM. Okay, so once you work in the real time, definitely you would come across that. And like I'll cover two more use cases. Once I do that, I don't think you will need anything apart from that when you work with your DVM. And again, I'll have an elaborated sessions on MDS also. So those are my like favorite topics. So just replicate this. The reason I didn't include qualifier in this is I don't want to confuse folks who are new to it. Any doubts from anyone so far? Okay. So we'll call it a, we'll end our session over here. For the first example, we can start with the second example tomorrow at the same time. So thanks for joining. Okay, if you have any concerns, you can stay back and we can discuss on this, or else we are done for the day. Okay guys, thanks for joining. I'll share the video across. Take care.
Hello.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, Sumita, I have asked you that question. Lookup table
Right.
function. Actually, right now I'm working on that one of the PIP. Like it has a lot of programs. When I open that code, it is picking the some value from database. Like I didn't understand that code. It is a ORCL lookup table, some database table name and a key and data source. So this is the function. So after you explain that this is picking the data from the some particular table based on the key and value like that. So if you are able to give it the one of the example like that, so that would very helpful for us. I think so.
Sure. Let me check on that. Actually, I haven't used that function. Let me check the exact syntax of that and let me try to include that in maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow sessions. Okay.
Yeah, okay. I will do one thing. I have that code, so I can mail you that one. So
Okay, you can
yes,
do that, or else I
good.
don't need it. Just once I check the signature of the function, I think that would be more
Yeah,
than sufficient.
yeah. Okay, fine.
Okay. Okay then guys, thanks for joining. Take care. Have a good day.